All right, get going. All right, hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to watch this interview. If you watched last week's with Uncle Chaps, this is one of his co-hosts, Connor. Thanks for taking the time to come on, Connor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super,
Thank you for having me.
super excited for you to be on here. Connor is a United States Army veteran. He's a former West Point football player, and he's one of the co-hosts of Zero Blog 30, the most popular military podcast in the world. Um, like I said last week, Zero Blog 30 is a military podcast with Barstool Sports. Connor is one of the original hosts of the podcast, along with Uncle Chaps, who I interviewed last week. They've been putting out Zero Blog 30 podcasts for almost 4 years, right?
Yeah, it'll be 4 years September.
Yeah, that's awesome. And during that time, they've interviewed Medal of Honor recipients Kyle Carpenter, Clint Romisha, Dakota Meyer. They've interviewed members of Congress, CIA and Secret Service agents, and they regularly advocate for service members to seek out mental health services if they need help. So they do a lot of great work. They interview a lot of cool people. Hop on a podcast platform and really watch that, and you can go back 4 years and you'll love all of them.
Yeah, but just be very, very kind to us, because what we sound like now is very different than what we sounded like 4 years ago in terms of the quality of the episodes.
Yeah, I've been listening for 3 years, and it's crazy the growth you guys have had. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's definitely different. We kind of just trial by fire there, figured it out as we went, and hopefully now we're doing something that is respectable.
Oh, it definitely is. So when I spoke to Chaps last week, I shared with him how I got introduced to your podcast. I heard you guys, or I heard Chaps' story on Pat McAfee's podcast when he first retired from Barstool. I wasn't a podcast guy prior to that, but I was a huge Pat McAfee fan. So I started listening to podcasts, and I heard Chaps' story from getting his Purple Heart, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool story. I instantly started listening to you guys right then, and that was 3 years ago, and I still listen every Tuesday and Friday religiously on my way to work. It gets me through the week, man. It's awesome.
Well, we really appreciate that level of support to stick with us. I think sometimes people might hear something like an interview on another podcast and then come over to Zero Blog 30, check us out once or twice, and then they think, okay, well, that was nice, I'm done with this. So to stick with us consistently every episode is something we genuinely appreciate.
Yeah, I love it. And since then, you guys have added Kate, one of your co-hosts. Now you guys have 3 people on the podcast. And you guys are putting out episodes every Tuesday, every Friday. And I don't know how you guys do it, but you guys keep getting like awesome interviews with awesome people. You have all these good relationship with congressmen and different federal agencies and stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was certainly one of those things where in the beginning it was more word of mouth and saying, hey, like, who do you know? Cons, who do you know? Who can we just get to come on the show, and just leveraging our own relationships. And then it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get one big name, and then the news starts to trickle. Speaking specifically about members of Congress, I remember we went all the way back. We had Congressman Adam Kinzinger.
Yep.
And from there, we had a good interview with him. And then word started to travel around the halls of Congress, because I think prior to that interview, people heard, especially in Washington, people hear Barstool Sports and they kind of maybe go the other direction.
Yeah.
But then once the other congressmen saw that, oh, wow, this is just another way to connect with an entire different demographic, a younger demographic of voters. Maybe this would be a good opportunity for me. And, oh, by the way, it's not a scripted sit-down interview that you typically see on these network news channels where it's very buttoned up. We allow these congressmen, certainly we don't force them to say anything, but we create an environment to where they feel comfortable being more of themselves. And we've never run into a situation where any of them has said anything off color. Well, except for maybe Duncan Hunter, who confessed to war crimes. That's probably not something you want to do.
No,
but,
don't do that.
But other than that, all these congressmen have come on and they've shown that, like, we're not like a gotcha podcast. We're not overly political to where we lean one way or the other and we want to make them look poorly.
Right.
We want to just hear their ideas. We want to hear about their experiences. Typically the congressmen and women we've interviewed have had prior service. So we hit it from that angle as well. So that's just a long way of saying that because we've done our best to treat these individuals with most respect and put them in a great light. That attitude around our show has become pervasive around Congress, that it's an okay place to go as an outlet.
Yeah, it seems like you guys actually have become legit friends with a couple of the congressmen that you guys talk to.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool how it works out. The internet's a weird place. We've had these interviews now. And, King Jr. comes to mind specifically for me, that we've had him a few times, and now he's somebody that I'll text with randomly here and there, and I'll get a text from him, and it's always funny when someone says like, "Oh, who are you talking to?" And you say just a sitting member of Congress. It's not a big deal, seriously. Just the people who make decisions that impact the entire country. But whatever, it's cool. It's cool. So it certainly is. It's very, very cool to be in that position, because never did I think we would start this podcast, or Chaps would start this podcast rather, and then all of a sudden we'd be welcomed on the Hill.
Yeah, that's super crazy. It's so cool though, because you don't typically get to hear those members of Congress be that relaxed. I don't know if relaxed is the right word, but
No, I think relaxed is the right word. We foster that environment that we say it's not going to be a typical 4 to 6 minute hit on Fox News or CNN, that you're used to. We're going to have a conversation, and we want you to feel comfortable saying whatever it is you want to say to your people, to your constituents. And I think it helps the fact that we do the interviews in their office, and typically their offices are very comfortable with couches and comfortable chairs. Just the physical aspect of it makes it a lot more of a relaxed atmosphere to where they feel okay opening up to us. And as I said, we're not about getting them to say something that's going to be incriminating. We're genuinely there to have thought-provoking conversations and to get their vantage point on various issues that are befalling our country today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So before I really jump into questions about your service, a lot of the people here in Indiana that I'm going to be reaching may or may not listen to Zero Blog 30. So if you would introduce yourself, your branch of service, what branch you were in, how long you served, stuff like that.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I played football at West Point, graduated from West Point in 2006, commissioned as a field artillery officer. I was very fortunate that I was selected for my first year of service to be a grad assistant football coach. So that was really cool to be a Division I grad assistant coach, and to learn even more about the game of football that I loved and played since I was a little kid, and to see it from the other side of things, the coaching room. But I did that for a year, and then I went to artillery school down there at Fort Sill in lovely Lawton, Oklahoma.
The best.
Anyone who's been to Lawton knows what a tremendous place it is. But then from Lawton, I was assigned my first platoon at Fort Hood, trained up, and it was kind of quick. I got to Fort Hood in November, December, and then I went home for Christmas. Came back in January, and it was really a whirlwind between January, and then we deployed to Iraq in June with a JRTC rotation mixed in there, and it was very, very fast. I was put in a position where I had to develop relationships with my NCOs and with my soldiers very quickly, and I did the best I could at that, and we deployed to Iraq in June of 2008, and I spent the first 5 months with my unit as a platoon leader, and then my battalion commander, who's now a major general, Tim Doherty, great gentleman. I learned a tremendous amount about leadership from that man. He thought enough of me to send me to a neighboring unit within our brigade, 19 Cav, where I served as a fire support officer for the remainder of the deployment. And as a fire support officer, I also took up responsibilities as the intelligence officer. And then with about 90 days, now probably maybe a little less left in the deployment, a buddy of mine was relieved of his platoon. So I took over as that platoon leader as well. So I had 3 different hats that I was wearing for a bit of the deployment there at the end, which was interesting to say the least, and kept me very busy. And then we were redeployed back to Fort Hood, and 2009, where I served out the remainder of my initial commitment until 2011 when I resigned my commission and made my way into the IRR for 3 years. And then 2014, the Army was all but in my rearview mirror. And then we are here today.
There we go. Awesome. Well, thanks for giving that background for everybody. So you took a path that not a lot of people are able to take by going to the United States Military Academy at West Point. How did you decide to go to a service academy and not a traditional university and do like ROTC?
Yeah. Well, I'll say that the Army wasn't something that I had my eye on when I was in high school. It wasn't something that I said, okay, this is what I want to do when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. And what was funny was my grandfather is a graduate of West Point as well. So I'd been going up there for football games since I was 4 years old. So I was very familiar with the school. And that's to say I was very familiar with how strict it was and how many rules there were. So, of course, I always said there's no way I'm going there. I cannot deal with all those rules, and that would be horrible. And then from going to different football camps and playing football in school, start to come around and start to recruit, and it came down to it. And I took all my visits, and my visit to West Point was the one that just felt the most right. I don't really have a very profound way of explaining it other than it was just a gut feeling that this is where I'm supposed to go. So that's how I ended up going to school there. And then obviously the implications of the life, hopefully, that I could lead with the connections I would be able to make there and through the alumni network was very strong. So I thought it would be a good decision to go get a first-class education, play Division I football. And although, holding a clipboard and holding field goals was not necessarily what I envisioned when I was a 17-year-old full of piss and vinegar, it still worked out. Still worked out great, and I still had a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you did. So I had asked Chaps, coming from the enlisted side, we just decide we want to do it and we go to MEPS, right?
Yep.
So a lot of times there's barriers or concerns that kids have, young adults have to overcome, whether it be like family concerns or passing an ASVAB or whatever. Did you have any barriers or concerns to overcome in order to get to West Point? Like, was your family supportive, anything like that?
My family was very supportive. As I mentioned, my dad's dad was a graduate. So when it came down to me going there and doing all the paperwork, I remember my dad was like, "Oh, I'll do it for you," which was kind of funny. He helped me with a lot of the admin paperwork that I had to fill out. And I don't know if I should say that or not, but he was more than thrilled. And then I think my mom probably had some reservations just because my class, just to shore up the timeline here, 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school. So my class was the first class to enter West Point post 9/11, which that kind of always sticks in my craw that they call the class of 2005 the 9/11 class. They were already there. They could have left if they wanted to. We were the first class that it happened, and we all said, okay, we see what's going on in the world, and we're still going to come.
Yep.
So the competition between the class of 05 and 06 has always been there in that regard.
Yeah.
But other than that, I was fortunate enough to do well in high school with my grades, so I didn't have an issue with any sort of the academic requirements. And I will say with any military academy, if you're a recruited athlete, they will do everything to help you to make sure that you're not impeded on the process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's just a very long-winded way of saying I was very, very fortunate, very lucky to have a very tremendous support group around me.
And that's important. That's something we try to tell everyone that comes in our office. Hey, you don't have to have your mom or dad sign for you if you're 18 years old, but it's important to have family support on making this decision.
I wholeheartedly agree, because you're making a decision that ultimately could impact your entire family should something happen to you. And that's something to be considered. I don't believe that it should be a selfish decision. You want your parents and your siblings and your friends to be supportive, but it's certainly not necessary. I just think it makes the road a lot easier.
Oh, for sure. So Does everyone that graduates from West Point go active duty, or do any of them go into the reserve component?
No, everyone's active duty. You have a 5-year commitment to pay back essentially the education that you just got from the taxpayers for free. There are very, very few instances where some people will have the grades necessary that they'll go to medical school, possibly right out of school. That is not common. That's one or two people each year. And then sometimes, in addition to that, we'll have folks who are Rhodes Scholars or various scholarships that they're able to pursue their academic career a little bit further before going fully into the Army.
What did you study at West Point?
Law and systems engineering.
Okay, cool. I never knew that. You don't really talk about the education piece. You always talk about football. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, talking engineering just doesn't have the same pizzazz as football stories. Hate to tell you.
Yeah.
It's like, you ever see the movie The Program?
I haven't seen it. No.
All right. Well, the Program. It's a great movie. It's a football movie from the early '90s.
Okay.
And the head coach, one of the lines he says, because they were concerned about a player's grades or something, and he said, "I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time 80,000 people showed up to watch a damn chemistry experiment." And I mean, to an extent, that's true. Academics are very important, and getting a good education is very important. Something that I'm very proud of and grateful for. But the football is certainly a little more exciting.
Yeah, you're right. So you talked about your deployment a little bit, about the different jobs you had and stuff. Can you go into your deployment a little bit more, like where you were, what your unit's mission was, stuff like that?
Yeah, so I deployed with 582 FA, 4th BCT, 1st Cav out of Fort Hood as a platoon leader. And we went to Balad, which was at the time Camp Anaconda, or LSA Anaconda, which is 70 miles north of Baghdad. And we were responsible for base security and in the surrounding area up to, I think it was like 20 or 25 miles around the base. So I would just every day. And it was weird because it was basically like 3 8-hour iterations to where you're either 8 hours on a mission, 8 hours sleeping, or 8 hours doing whatever it is you wanted to do, be that prep, gym, food, whatever. So it was every day we were outside the wire, just looking for bad guys, talking to locals, trying to gather intelligence to provide us with information that could be actionable on anything that was happening around the base. I did that for about 4.5 months. And then we went to another large base, and the name escapes me because I would probably know it if I was there longer, but we were there only about a month. And our mission there was training Iraqi soldiers. So I spent a month overseeing the training of 500 Iraqi soldiers. So it was just my platoon of 33 guys that had to train 500. So that was certainly a challenge in and of itself, just from the numbers standpoint. But that was also a great experience in learning how to manage that many people. And, oh, by the way, there's a language barrier and you only have one interpreter. So that was
security
yeah,
is taken into consideration.
Absolutely. And then just one day, the colonel pulls me into his office and says, "Hey, I think you have a future in the Army, and we need you to get a little more experience in some different roles. So I need you to go pack all your stuff. You're going to 19 Cav." And it wasn't a discussion about, "Hey, do you think this is something you might want to do, or this is an option?" It was, "Hey, this is what you're doing." And I think that's just so indicative of how the Army is normally, that you don't have a choice. You just do what you're told. So I packed up my stuff, and the hardest part for me was leaving my guys, these guys that I had trained with, these guys that I had developed relationships with, these guys that had looked out for me, these guys that had been through a lot together. And I felt almost like I was abandoning them. I did feel like I was abandoning them. And I felt bad. They understood, because it's not as though I rose my hand and said, "Hey, I want to get the hell out of here." It was just something I was told to do. So that was really difficult for me for the first few days. And then I'm getting sent to this unit where I don't know a single soul. So to go on a deployment is hard enough because of the obvious reasons. But one of the things that makes a deployment a lot easier is having all those people around you that you can lean on and that will help you get through everything. So then I go to this new unit and they sit me down at a desk, and I'm sitting next to the XO, and this guy, Lieutenant Rob Dwayne. And long story short, Rob became one of my best friends ever. I got very, very lucky that it turned out Rob was a cool guy. And we always joke, like, dude, what if you sucked? that would have been terrible if you sucked as a person. So we had this one tent, and then they moved us and we built another HQ. So me and Rob actually had our own office that we shared, but by no means was it anything grand. It was very, very tiny. But that goes to show even more how important it was that we got along, because we sat back to back every day, all day.
That's cool.
Excuse me. So, but what was cool about this deployment, or this part of the deployment, was as the FSO and the intelligence officer, I made my own schedule in that I got to decide what was most fruitful for me to go out on, what missions would make the most sense. So I just got to pick and choose when I would leave the wire. So I was still leaving the wire almost every day, but it was only on missions that I deemed could provide me information. And I got to shoot artillery a lot more, albeit smaller artillery. On my, the first half of my deployment, we were just riding around in Humvees. There was no artillery whatsoever. And then on this one, we had mortars. So getting back to my artillery roots, and being able to put rounds downrange was a lot of fun for me. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I had a buddy who pushed a few too many buttons one too many times and got relieved of his platoon. So then that was another challenge, that they really liked this guy, and he was awesome. He wasn't reckless. He was just full of a little too much piss and vinegar sometimes, and sometimes he let his judgment get the best of him, and what he thought was going to be a good idea, and looking out for his men, not realizing that at the same time he was probably putting some people's safety in jeopardy. And I think that was just a product of his age, and not necessarily anything wrong with his heart or where his head was at. So yeah, and then I got to be a platoon leader all over again. So it was interesting doing the three different jobs: the intelligence officer, the FSO, and the platoon leader all at once. So figuring out how to juggle my time was a unique challenge to end my deployment.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's a lot of responsibility for a new LT. But thank you for sharing your story. I really like hearing the stories from other veterans. I think it's a way we can connect with each other, even though we never served together directly. So your experience and my experience were totally different. But it's a way that service members can transcend geography, branch, MOS, and make that connection with each other. Regardless, like we've never met face to face the first time we ever talked, but we can still make connections based on our service. And I think that's important for people to do.
Yeah. Because as you mentioned, I mean, everyone's time is different, but we all wear the same uniform. And for as many stories that are different, it's so funny. And even because Chaps and Kate were in the Marines, it's funny how many things transcend time and transcend branches, where it doesn't matter when you served, where you served, or even what branch you served. There are certain things that are still universal throughout the military that you can connect on with just about anybody. So some of the acronyms or terminology might be a little different, but there's so many things that we connect on.
Yeah, it's awesome. Me and Chaps actually talked about that, how you and Chaps and Kate are like very different personalities, but you guys get along really well. You have disagreements and arguments and stuff, but you're all friends, and it's very much like a platoon. You have all these different personalities, and you come together.
Yeah, it's so funny. I remark all the time how initially the reason it worked was because Chaps, an enlisted Marine, and then me, an Army officer with a West Point background, couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's what you're going to get out in the military too. You're going to get the old crusty NCO and the brand new officer, and it just kind of works. And I don't think the show would be as interesting. And then, you bring on Kate, a lower enlisted NCO. I don't think it would be as interesting if we were all just the same. I think having those different viewpoints and different experiences are what spice things up and keep it fresh. Because if we just sat around every week and just agreed with one another, I think that would get tired. I think it would get boring.
Yeah.
And certainly with each issue that we discuss, discuss each topic, it's funny how it really harkens back to what it was like in the military. And when Chaps will say things, I'm like, yeah, you were very much an NCO who got annoyed with officers. And then I find myself having opinions, and I know how I come off. It's like, oh, there goes that. I mean, we joke about officers now. We call them loafers instead of boots. They give me a hard time about being, the fancy boy on the show. And that's just so funny, because my nickname from my platoon, when we first got to Iraq, they started calling me Spoon, because they swore I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. So it's just the dichotomy of all the different personalities, I think makes for an interesting show.
It does. So I think the military and like just service in general prepares us for successful civilian careers, because you're not at your civilian job shooting artillery rounds, and I'm a truck driver traditionally, and I don't do that every day. But we get leadership training, learn dedication, loyalty, integrity, all those soft skills that employers really love to see. So what have you been up to since you left the service? I know you're affiliated with Barstool, but that's not your full-time job. So what do you do? What hobbies do you do? What does Captain Cons like to do in his free time?
Oh, my free time, I like to just do all the typical officer shit. I like to golf. I like to read. I like to snowboard. One thing I should mention, so I mentioned this guy that I served with, Rob, and we went back to Fort Hood, and we hung out all the time after deployment. And then he was ROTC, so he had one less year on his commitment. So he left Fort Hood, and I found myself missing my buddy. So then he invited me. He's from Salt Lake City. He moved home to Salt Lake City. He invited me out one time to go snowboarding, because he lives 15 minutes from a mountain. And now here we are 10 years later, and I haven't missed a year. I've gone every year for the last 10 years on this trip with my battle buddy there. So it's certainly something that I treasure, and I really look forward to each year. But in terms of work, I got out, and fortunate to have a tremendous alumni network that I leaned on, and I found my way into the finance world in New York City, and I've been doing that in different capacities since January of 2012. So now 8 years I've been in working in business, and then just really, really fortunate to have found my way into the Barstool family. Yeah. As of, going back to 2015 with a couple other guys, Clem and Big Cat, we had a different podcast other than Zero Blog 30, and just getting my foot in the door. And then now being affiliated with just such a tremendous company with a lot of amazing people, and a lot of whom I've become actual friends with outside of Barstool. It's just, I don't know if it's just the attitude I take towards life, or if I really am just this lucky, but I just, things just always seem to work out for me. And again, I don't know if that's just, I take a good positive attitude, because
you're optimistic.
I had a coach, he used to drill it into our heads, positive mental attitude. And I don't know if it's so much, it's just, I just take a positive attitude. So no matter what situation you put me in, I'll be like, oh, this is great. Or if it really is that I've just been put in a lot of great situations, or if it's a combination of both. But either way, I've just been very, very fortunate.
You mentioned Big Cat and Clem. Is Clem the coolest dude in the world, like he seems like on podcasts?
Yeah, no, Clem is just a sweetheart. I've known Clem now 5 years, I guess, maybe 5.5, 6 years. I don't think I've ever seen the guy angry. I've never seen him even in person, outside of being on camera or on a podcast. I don't know that I've ever seen him annoyed about anything outside of maybe the Knicks. But even that's always short-lived. He's just he has a really good zest for living, and he really is the best hugger at Barstool. And he's just a really good guy and someone that you enjoy being with, not just on a podcast, but out at a ball game or just hanging out, having a few beers, watching the game at a bar. He's a tremendous guy.
Yeah, he is. So what does the future hold for Captain Cons? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Wow, good question. Really good question. As it pertains to Barstool, I hope we just, as a company, we continue to grow and continue to get our, what's the best word I could say? I mean, I guess our brand out there to help people realize that, the things that you might read about Barstool aren't really telling the actual story.
Yeah, the hit pieces aren't the full story.
Right. I hope that just Barstool as a company continues to grow and gets into more households and onto more people's phones. And then selfishly, I hope Zero Blog 30 just follows that same growth pattern. Like if we continue on the course that we've been on since we started, hopefully it means good things for us in the future. And I just, maybe this is my naivete, or maybe this is just my Pollyanna view of things, but I just hope everyone, continues to be happy and continues to do well and continues to succeed. And one thing I can say for myself personally is I'll continue to put my work ethic at the forefront of everything and continue to work hard. And I don't know if it's so much, success is judged in a lot of different ways. But if we can continue to help the veteran community, and if we can become, I think if you walk down the street and you say maybe Wounded Warriors as an example, I think just about anybody might know what Wounded Warriors is because of the platform that they've created and how pervasive they are in our culture. I would hope that Zero Blog 30 could get up to that level to where you say Zero Blog 30 to someone in, we'll start with just the veteran community and they know who we are, and we've continued to grow. And I think that's the best thing I get out of doing the show is the way that we are able to impact the veteran community and the positive impact and the way we are able to help people. Yeah. Nothing makes me happier than when someone sends me a note and says, you guys, I found you and you were there for me and you helped. Mm-hmm. That to me is more valuable than any amount of money than you could ever give me, any amount of cool swag or gear that you could give me. Something like that, it really sticks with you, and it really gives you a purpose, because there are times when I feel, and I don't know what this is a result of, but there are times when I feel like I didn't do enough with my time in the military, and I should have stayed longer, or I should have made more of an effort to do, different roles, different jobs. So whenever I feel those feelings, I try to think about how am I helping the veteran community now, and that's just so important to me to continue to help others and continue to make an impact. So, sorry, that was a really long-winded answer to say, like, I hope we're even more awesome in 5 years.
Well, if you follow the glide path you're on now, I have no doubt it's only going to keep getting better. So my last question for you is, what piece of advice would you give to someone that's considering military service, or someone that maybe has never considered the military before?
I mean, the poetic answer is, they say that there's no greater gift than to lay down one's life for another. That's like the Hollywood answer. But I am, I have a very, I guess, optimistic view of things. And I do believe that serving one's country is a great gift, and it will give you an appreciation for everything else that we have in this life. So I think if you're considering joining the military, just know that it is a very proud way to spend a portion of your life, whether that's 3 or 4 years, or whether that's a 20-year career in any shape or fashion. It's a tremendous way to spend your time. And I really do think it is an honor to serve your country, a country that is so amazing and gives so much to us and affords us so many great opportunities to give back in some way, big or small. I think is so important. And certainly I think the skills that you learn in the military are so valuable, that transcend the military, and you can take with you for the rest of your life. And then potentially the greatest thing the military will give you is perspective that will allow you to accomplish anything in life and allow you to overcome any obstacles. I think part of the reason I'm doing as well as I am in this quarantine thing is because I've been in similar situations with deployments or in the military where you're away from a lot of the comforts, and the monotony of the days can get to you. But I'm just so grateful for the life I lead, just because I think I have that perspective. So even when things are not great, I'm still I'm happy to be here, sitting in a comfortable chair with a nice cup of tea, talking to you. And I'm just very proud to have served in the military.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate you talking about your past, your service. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It means a lot to me. It shows a lot about your character. You have no idea who I am, and you agreed to do this via Twitter direct message. So that's awesome. I told Chaps last week, your podcast has been a major part of my life for the last 3 years. It helps me get through the work week. It keeps me on an even keel because I feel like I connect with you guys. And your work and support for the veteran community is, I believe, truly making a difference, and it's helping improve veterans' lives. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for saying that. And really that sentiment right there, that's what makes it worth it. And I like helping people. So if I can help people like yourself, just help get through their work week, then that means the world to me. So thank you.
Yeah, you guys kill it. So if you're into podcasts and you're checking out this video, check out Zero Blog 30. It's on anywhere you can get a podcast. Connor is on Twitter and Instagram at Captain Cons.
Yep.
Follow him. He's like Chaps. They're funny. They go back and forth. They give each other a hard time, but they also put out a lot of good content for veterans, by veterans. And so, yeah, thank you, Connor. I appreciate you doing this. I hope you have a good time with the rest of your quarantine. I hope you and your family are staying safe, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Greg. You too, buddy.
Thank you.